Okay, thank you very much, Christine. So now we're in the Q&A session, and I'm going to ask for those of you who have questions to please state your name and also maybe your organizations, just so in the event that we need to correct something, we know who to find. And I'll take a few questions, and then we'll answer them, and then move on to the next set. So this lady here.
Hello. Yes, so my first question is to Mrs. O'Donnell on her presentation. You mentioned that it was about 60, where did I write it down? Barely almost 68 billion that are the assets that the pension fund currently holds. But then you said the benefits that come, the contributions every year are 2.5 billion and you pay out 2.7 billion in benefits, but that you tap for the remaining 200 million into the 67.8 billion. Now, I would consider that you make, if you have good investments, at least 5, if not 6% of interest a year on this. So you wouldn't need to tap on it. I mean, you should be able to actually pay out all benefits just by the interests you're making. You never mentioned those interests and what's happening to them. I mean, there's all that. And then I have two other questions that are not specifically for you. One is I am in the self-service thing, and I have done my estimates. The estimates without knowing, and we only basically in the UN system have 3 health insurance that we use: Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, and Cigna. As long as you don't know how much your health insurance will cost you out of pocket at any given time when you separate, as long as you don't make that a part of the estimate that you provide us, the estimate is worth really little, because I don't know if I get taken $200, $400, $800 for health insurance if I retire at 57, at 60, at 62, how much that would be. I'm aware that this is all an estimate, but before you don't include that, it's basically quite worthless. And two things that after your presentation today come to mind is that, first of all people who contribute are basically kind of financing the promotions in the last years of people who get a lot of pension, like the D2s and the P5s or whoever else is, because they contributed basically their whole lifetime at one level. G-staff contributes at the same level their whole lifetime and gets a much lower pension than somebody who in the last years gets a few promotions and then suddenly gets a lot of money for the rest of their lives while retired. That's one thing. And the second, which I'm very surprised also just to consider, is that if you only look at the best 3 years in the last 5 years, that is highly punitive to people on lower levels who serve in the field repeatedly, maybe for several years during their lives, and contribute. When I'm in the field, I earn about double as much as I do at headquarters, and I contribute accordingly to the pension fund. But if I don't go to the field and spend my last years of service in a hazard peacekeeping mission, I will not receive any pension that is related to that. So I might have contributed for 10 years at a much higher level, at the double of what I earn in New York, and then I will still get only a pension of what I earn in the last 5 years in New York, while basically maybe somebody who just stayed in New York the whole 30 years and worked at the P2 level, and then in the last 5 years becomes whatever, somebody more important, gets a much higher pension without having contributed throughout their lifetime to the pension fund. So these are all, considerations that come to mind with your presentation, which particularly I don't find very fair.
Thank you for your question. Okay, we'll answer them since you had so many. Kisa, do you want to take the first one, and then I ask Christine to answer the other 3?
Thank you very much. You're very right. We do have interest income, and normally that's also used to subsidize whatever is the difference between the contribution that's being received and the payouts. So I did not mention that, but you're right. I mean, we do not immediately tap into the principal of the fund. investment income that's being used, then of course it goes there before we even get into the principal. So yes, that was an oversight, so thank you for pointing that out. But you're very right. Investment income is actually also used to subsidize or to make up the difference between the contributions received and the payouts. For the other part, I mean, all I can say is that under the defined benefit plan, there are some winners and there are some losers. And indeed, that is just what the nature of the plan is. So how it's defined is that we do look at the last 5 years and pick the best 3 years of there, the best 3 years within those last 5 years, and that's how we arrive at the final average remuneration rate, final average remuneration. The thing is, if you're a professional, there's a PR table. So it doesn't matter whether you're in New York, you're in Geneva, or you're in somewhere in Africa. It's based on a table. So normally it doesn't really matter where your location is. It's based on the table, based on your grade and level and step. So I'm not quite sure where you're saying if you're in a peacekeeping mission serving in, let's say, UNAMID, as opposed to you are in New York, if you're a professional, that should still be based on the same PR table. I'm not sure if Christine may want to supplement that.
Maybe. I think what I
before
understood,
we go back to you.
If I understood your question correctly, or your comment, I guess, was more about the fact that we are basing our FAR on the highest 36 months in the last 60 months rather than the entire career possibly, where you said that what about those who served maybe 7 years ago at a higher level in peacekeeping but then end their career? No, that's not it. Okay, sorry.
No, it is to clarify. I have served several years in 5 different missions, most of them hazard and hardship missions. So I just came back 2 years ago, for example, from a mission where my salary after deductions on my account was about $7,800 with hardship and hazard and all that. And now I just ran the estimate. If I retire at my first possible retirement age, which would be now at my birthday on 12th November, what I get a month is $1,500, which basically, so 2 years ago I was earning $7,800, and right now my retirement would be $1,500 because I'm G staff in New York, and because they look at the last years or whatever. So I don't know how it was completed, but it's weird because I was earning a lot more in the last 5 years. I don't know how the estimate got at $1,500 if I was earning $7,800 2.5 years ago.
The important part maybe to know is that for pensionable remuneration, that is based on grade and step, but doesn't take into account hardship, duty station, etc. So whether, as Kisa said, regardless of where you are serving, it's based on your grade and step. So if you are, let's say, P4 in a peacekeeping mission, hardship peacekeeping mission, and you get an accordingly higher salary with a hardship allowance and so on, your pensionable remuneration, however, will be exactly the same as a P4 in New York or a P4
well,
in...
I'm G when I'm in New York.
Before, G. I'm sorry, I understood
Before,
P.
I'm FS5 when I'm in the field. Before, I used to be a professional in the field and come back to G positions in New York, and the FCRB stopped
so then
that.
it is about this, that you are going to go back basically to a lower pensionable remuneration rate for more than 36 months before you separate. So therefore, it will negatively indeed impact your future entitlements, because it can't take into, as per our formula, it cannot take into account periods prior to the 60 months that are taken into account for the final average remuneration. So if you, I guess you're further away than 5 years from your separation date, your potential separation date.
No, and I'm 2 weeks away.
You're going to separate? And how long?
No, I'm not planning to. I mean, I could not separate on $1,500, and if I take my health insurance away, it doesn't even pay for my rent. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So, I mean, I think it comes down to the issue of, indeed, since we are basing the calculation of the final average on the highest 36 months in the last 5 years, if your highest pensionable remuneration rates are not within the last 5 years, indeed you are not benefiting from them.
Well, I came back in 2017, and still my pension is $1,500.
Maybe we should have a look at your estimate just to make sure that it's correct also. Yeah, I think maybe we take it separately at the end, so to have a look at it.
Because but I mean, Besides that, if I don't manage
Yeah.
to go on mission before I
Yeah.
go on pension, I would get a G5 New York pension instead of 10 of the years that I did contribution while I
That
was
is
earning.
correct. If ever
more.
you exceed 36 months on the lower now G stuff than the FSS level, then yes, that's true. And I mean, do you want me to answer the other question or?
Just a very, very quick
Yeah.
clarification, right? It is not, your salary is not the basis for your pension contributions. It's the pensionable remuneration. So you may have been getting a higher salary, but because of the hazard pay, et cetera, that goes along with it, that is not part of the pension package, right?
Be
So-
that $1,500,
Right.
It would still be 6,000 or something like that compared to me supposed to then survive on $1,500 if I retire in 2
Okay,
weeks.
but we can take that
think
offline
we
and
have to look
explain
at it,
that to
yeah.
you further.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we should look at it. Do you want me? So let me just answer the ASHI question, the health insurance, where you said that the estimate, since it doesn't include the health insurance estimated deduction, we are not allowed to include that because ASHI is entirely separate. The insurance, as you know probably, pension doesn't administer health insurance. It's under the UN insurance section, so we cannot make any prediction about what the amounts are because we're not administering this. This is not our regulations and rules. It's really only pension. However, what normally is the case that anyone who wants to get an estimation of how much the ASHI deduction might be if they are separating in the near future, and I think normally the health insurance section says come to them not years before, but months before you separate. Based on the estimate that you're going to bring along from the pension fund, they can then give you an estimation of what the premium for after-service health insurance would be if you're entitled. And then with that, you have the elements to calculate what would be your actual net income every month. So yes, indeed, you need that information, I get that, but the fund has no access to that information and therefore could not include that in any estimate. And we could also not audit and verify that kind of information. So that is something that we can't combine in an estimate that we run in our systems.
Then at least write it big in red there because, I mean, if anyone goes to the estimate as you recommended and then goes like, oh, I can do this, I can retire next month, and then suddenly it's like, oh, it's $400 less because of insurance, it should at least have a note there.
Right. The problem is that we don't know who is eligible for after-service health insurance. So some people are not. So if we go, we don't have any doings in advising on after-service health insurance. It's a separate, entirely separately administered entity, and we cannot go and say, your ASHI deductions are not included because we don't even know if someone is entitled to be covered by ASHI.
I mean,
so it's something where we would, I think, cross lines with. I think it's more about maybe being clear on our website that we are not handling ASHI
exactly.
issues.
So
or
if you are
something.
entitled,
Yes.
your insurance will still be deducted from that.
So
Please
maybe
find out with
that's
them.
something we can see whether we can improve that in communicating that as part of.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. All right. So answered or.
Okay, let's move on. Next question, this lady up here.
I just would like to be enlightened regarding, sorry, I'm French, and the expression I'm going to use is la double filière.
Oh,
could you tell me more about this?
Yes, we understand. Gisa, you want to or German? Okay. So our colleague asked about the two-track. La double
Yes,
filière en
thank you.
français. So the two-track is a system that under the regulations of the pension fund, we have a pension adjustment system that basically allows for those who elect to be paid and whose pension they elect that their pension be adjusted, not based on the US dollar track and not based on the movements of the consumer price index of the US dollar in the United States, but that who wish that their pension be adjusted based on the country or the movements of the CPI, the consumer price index, of the country where they actually reside. So that is this two-track element, and it's called the two tracks because if someone wanted to be paid under the two-track and have their adjustments based on the movements of the CPI of their country of residence as opposed to, by default, the US dollar track, they would have to prove residence in that country. We have to have actually CPI data to be able to calculate that. And then if we have that information, then we would compare every quarter that this person receives a benefit from us within 2 thresholds. Which is the more beneficial amount within these thresholds? Is it the one payable under the US dollar track or under the track that is the local track of the country where the person resides? And when we say track, we mean the amount payable based on the applicable cost of living adjustment, but also the exchange rate that applies between the US dollar amount and the local currency amount. So it's a rather complex system, and I would say we are happy to explain that in much more detail, but there is a booklet about the 2-track on our website in French and in English. And maybe as a first step, read the booklet, and then if you come and visit us here in New York in our client services office, we can go into much more detail and also look into maybe the country that you might be interested in and explain to you in more detail. But just as an idea, and that's very important, this applies only to retirees, so being paid on the local track or under the 2-track adjustment system is possible only for regular pension benefits. And once someone has elected to not have their pension based on the US dollar track, but on their local track, on the country of where they reside, it applies as a principle for life. So basically you make that decision not only based on a country, but as a principal decision where you say, I want my purchasing power adjusted or based on where I live and not the United States. And if you move from the initial 2-track country, let's say France, to a different country where maybe the consumer price index movements are different and the amount that the local track would yield would be lower, you would have to inform the pension fund, and we would then recalculate your entitlement under the 2-track and the comparison amounts for that country where you actually reside. So it's a lifelong decision. It follows you around the world if you change address from one country to another country. It's important that you inform the pension fund, and it is about the adjustment of your pension over time, just to try and keep it succinct. Maybe Kisa wants to add some information? No?
No, I'm just going to add that, okay, when you retire from service, all the pension benefits are calculated under the dollar track, meaning we establish your dollar benefit, and then this pension amount gets adjusted whenever there's a movement of the CPI of about 2%, right? So that's how your pension gets adjusted. Now, if you happen to live in a country other than the US, let's say you live in France, you have the option of going on this, what you call the 2-track, so that your benefit gets adjusted in the French, based on the French movement of the CPI. And that's where it kind of gets a little bit more complicated. But then again, we always do a comparison, and you get the higher of the two, but it's subject to a cap and it's subject to a floor. So as Christine says, maybe if you want specific information on that, we could actually do a one-on-one after this, where we will be very happy to explain the 2-track to you. But it's an option. It's not mandatory. And there are, points that you need to take into account before you actually embark on that. So I would suggest that you see a client service person after this.
And maybe just for estimations, because before making a decision to go on this local track or 2-track, you would obviously need an estimate. That can only be generated once you have actually separated and we have calculated your base pension entitlement, because that is the baseline to calculate the values, as Kisa mentioned, the floor value and the maximum, the cap values. So in other words, if you're interested in the 2-track, the actual useful information that you need to make the decision as to whether you want it to be applied to your case or not is an estimate, a 2-track estimate, and that you can obtain only once your benefit is actually has been calculated. So you can request that estimate at the time of submitting your separation documents. You tell us for which country you would like to know what the local track would be, the value would be. So if instead of being paid on the dollar track, you are paid this pension entitlement on the local track, and then we would provide you with an estimate based on which you can then assess whether it is beneficial for you to actually go on the local track or maybe not and remain on the US dollar track. You can elect to go on the 2-track at any time during your retirement. So you don't have to decide that at the time of actually starting retirement. You can request an estimate for a 2-track value 6 years after retirement, 15 years after retirement, and there are certain factors that will feed into this, but what is very important is always when we calculate your entitlement value at the time of separation and the average 36 months average exchange rate from the date of separation back into the past, prior to separation, that would then indicate to us what is the equivalent in the local currency of the country where you move to of the value of your pension. So you see, it's rather complex, and I think it's something that will take up much more time if you wanted more information, but definitely read the booklet and let us know if you need more information so we can assist you with that. Thank you.
Question?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I got a little bit of it. My name is Scholar Mado, and I'm the chair of the Global Staff Association for UNICEF. This is based on the feedback from the field that the pension fund has so much information. The information is very technical and very complex. Usually, staff members don't get to understand what their entitlements are until when they are leaving the last minute, and they're just rushing to tick boxes. It's important that pension fund gets closer to the people right from the time that they're engaged, when they get recruited, even when they are 25, so that it's a process, it's a gradual process of learning and understanding what the pension is all about so that we can feedback and improve on it. The system has been the same for all these years. The world has changed. Then you realize at the time of retirement that it's too late to make any changes, and we end up stuck and not being changing with the times. So this is literally, for me, is a prayer that pension fund works out a strategy of reaching out to the staff members. Like now I'm interested in pension fund now because I'm about to retire. And what I'm hearing is scaring, and I don't know whether it's going to help me, and I can't take it back. So if I had, there was an investment in educating me through the process, now not just me, imagine the people in the field with language issues, with capacity issues. There's just a little much more that needs to be done. Maybe we work with staff association and the organizations that are member organizations to start right from the time that I'm signing my letter of appointment, that the pension fund is an integral component of this continuous learning and training. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I think it's a very valid one, and I think that you're right. It's very, very technical information. We don't often think about it until it's needed at the very end, but it would be helpful to understand it from the very beginning. And so we're reaching out now to work with HR departments to emphasize the importance of knowing about pension benefit entitlement, even though it may be years off. People should have information and should start thinking about it. And I really couldn't agree with you more. Let me ask my colleagues if they want to add to that.
Thank you, Janice. And indeed, the fund is very, very mindful of the need to actually reach out, and not just to HQ duty stations or Geneva, but to go out there in the field to educate our participants about the pension. So in fact, over the last, especially in the last couple of years, we have actually increased our outreach activities. We go out there, we do a proactive reach out, especially when we know that there are huge movements of staff. So this is where I believe you're, with the staff union of UNICEF, we will partner. We will be very interested in partnering with you. If you know of a country or a duty station where there is great interest in learning about the pension, please let us know. We would be happy to do it by VTC in the beginning. I mean, because we don't have sufficient staff to go out there in the duty stations to do an in-person visit. But definitely, we are very much interested in strengthening our outreach, especially to the field offices who really need this information, actually, because the people in New York or Geneva would have easy access to us.
Hello, Skula. Maybe just to add to that, specifically also, yes, we are doing a lot of VTCs actually. I would say nearly every week we have VTCs. But since we are servicing 24 organizations with so many country offices, we get requests all the time. And what we're trying to do is whenever we get a request to, like recently we got a request from UNICEF Niger, and to say, we are very happy to give you this briefing session, but can you help us bring in not only your office, but help us liaise with the resident coordinator and bring in the other offices that are in that same duty station, let's say, for example, Niamey, so that we can brief actually UNICEF plus WFP, you know, the usual organizations that are present in these country offices oftentimes. And that, I think, we have made a specific point of doing that in the last year and doing more and more. But 100%, I think we all are fully in agreement with you that we have to be closer to our people in the field because it is difficult information to absorb. And as you said, you need it earlier than later. And it's important. And even just understanding estimates is so important because it actually does make a big difference for someone who does understand how to read their estimate, opposed to someone who sees numbers but doesn't know how to break it down into what does this mean, what is a lump sum in this context. And, you know, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. So we all agree, and I think, as Gisa said, more and more also trying to work proactively and with staff associations because you know, the needs of the staff, you often hear them earlier than the administration. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Question here?
For very good presentation. I have two short questions. First, is the fund investing or has ever invested in US stock market? This is one. And second, is withdrawal supplement taxable by the US or IRS? If the withdrawal market is transferred to the local bank account. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier in my presentation that we would not be making any comments about the investment side of the pension fund because that's really not run by the fund secretariat. It is really handled by the Office of Investment Management. They would be very happy to take any questions that you may have. They have a website, and I think that you should feel free to ask your question of that office. I just don't feel that that's appropriate for me to respond to. With regard to your question on taxable, the withdrawal settlement. Yeah, you want to.
Yeah, okay. So regarding the question of is it withdrawal settlement taxable, basically that is depending on your country of residence and where you are going to declare that income, if you have to declare it. So the fund obviously has no knowledge and authority to advise on tax. We don't have tax experts for the 190 plus countries that we service. What we do have is on our website, we published the taxation guide that was created by the Office of Legal Affairs and the UN Tax Unit several years ago in the context of the UN OHIM organized, at the time OHIM organized pre-retirement seminar. And they created a taxation guide, which they allowed us to take and publish on our website as a service to anyone who gets a benefit from us. Inside that taxation guide, you will find information specifically about taxation of pension benefits in the US. And it includes taxation of the withdrawal settlement. So there you will get as much information about this question as you can get from the pension fund. For additional information, you may want to visit the UN Tax Unit. Although they usually say we're not here to give advice to people on specifics, they are very knowledgeable on US taxation, and they are very accommodating in advising in that regard. So I think start with the taxation guide. So if you go on our website, just put in the search field taxation or pension, taxation of pension, and you'll find it. It will bring you right to the page. Read it. It will give you a lot of information. And then if you still have questions, I would say UN Tax Unit is the best source and the most knowledgeable. So sorry, I can't give more information on that. Thank you.
Hi. I just want to say thank you for this information. This is very well planned to try to educate the participants, aka the staff members, concerning to all the knowledge about the pension fund. But I have something, a concern, thinking ahead of the time, future. As we see the organization going a route, using more and more contractors, which are not staff members. Therefore, they're not contributing to the pension fund. So it's just like any imbalance. More contractors, less staff members, that means less money going into the pension fund. How sustainable the pension fund will be in the future? Especially that we also embarking in so massive downsizings in the field. So I just want to know, I don't know if you'd be able to address this, or something that we could put up there to try to think how sustainable the pension fund will be in the future, because we're going to be retiring in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and most likely the route will be a problem in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. It's a good one, and it's a long-term one, and I've heard it discussed in different fora in terms of, less employees, less staff members, more contractors. What is that? What impact is that? I think the Joint Inspection Unit is doing sort of a big overview of that right now. I mean, they talk to different agencies. I know that we were consulted, but it covers kind of, it's a human resource issue, and so it's a big problem. And I know that study is ongoing to address that problem. Whether there will be a reasonable recommendation or solution, I don't know that. But yes, it's very much on the minds of the people who think down the road on the impact of pension funds, workforce, mobility, and that type of thing, and the impact it has. So thank you for raising that question. Michelle?
Yes. Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm the staff rep on the Health and Life Insurance Committee, and I just wanted to let the staff who asked the question about the rates on ASHI know that you can find them at www.un.org/insurance and just search rates. And so there is a table there. If you look at the information you got on the estimate, you can just look and you'll see the rate that you'll be paying, depending on which insurance, Aetna, Blue Cross, that you're going to be using. Okay, so that's pretty simple for you to see, because you were asking, about the insurance. Pardon? /insurance. It's the insurance sections page, right? Okay. I think for the guy who asked about the investments, we're going to be, the pension reps are going to be having an information session on the 13th of November, and I think we plan to ask, we're hoping to get the RSG to be here, there, so maybe you can ask him your investments questions. No, our investments questions.
Question, if the fund, UNCPU, investing in U.S. markets.
So he would be able to say. He would be able to say that, right?
The board do not know?
This is the Secretariat, not the Office of Investments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Maybe to complement just what Michelle just said, also, and I think Gisa mentioned it at the beginning, do visit the pension fund's website and there link to the Office of Investment Management site, because they do have quite some information about how they invest. So maybe you'll find already an answer to your questions there. So they have a specific website dedicated to the investments of the pension fund. So if you, I can pull it up again. I don't know whether it would show. But if you go to our website, Pension Fund Secretariat website, so UNJSPF.org, on the left top corner, there is a tab Office of Investment, OIM, tap there, and it brings you to the investments page, or website actually. And there they have more information. Maybe you've already visited and it's not there, but it's definitely worth exploring. Sorry, I don't hear.
Oh. The fund invests, right?
The fund invests.
I see. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Oh, yes, okay. Oh, sorry, okay.
Any additional questions? Yes.
Joining others also in thanking you all for this very useful presentation. And in fact, I was wondering whether the PowerPoint would be available to staff. But the specific question was whether you could say a few words on the option of the lump sum and how to look at that. Thank you very much.
Sure. I don't know whether I can bring up the, I mean, even if not, it doesn't matter. Sure, of course. So here you are asking about the lump sum, and maybe that's a good moment actually to also just remind everyone that there's a difference between when we talk about withdrawal settlement and the lump sum. So the lump sum is what we refer to as the cash portion that those who are entitled to a normal or early retirement benefit can elect to receive portion of their entitlement commutated into a cash lump sum payable at the time of implementation of their retirement benefit. So that's an option, not an obligation. It's basically you can leave with regular monthly payments for life plus a bucket full of money. So that cash, the maximum cash portion you can take is 1/3 of your entitlement, which basically is, as a maximum, you could take the equivalent of your own contribution and the interest that you have earned on those contributions out as a cash portion, in which case, however, you reduce your lifelong entitlement for life proportionately. I don't know, it doesn't show up there. But so that's an option under both the normal and the early retirement benefit. You choose whether you want a lump sum, and if you do want a lump sum, whether you want the maximum lump sum or less than the maximum. Again, accordingly, you would therefore impact your lifelong entitlement, which would be proportionately reduced if you take a lump sum cash payout. It is accordingly reduced for life, so there's never a readjustment. Some people ask about that. And maybe just also that for survivors' benefits, so if a retiree who had opted for a lump sum payment died and then was survived by a spouse who's entitled to a surviving spouse's benefit from us, that would always be 50% of the full entitlement prior to lump sum commutation. So even if our retiree said, I want the cash, the max cash, and reduces their full entitlement by 1/3, basically taking out 1/3 cash, the surviving spouse would still get 50% of the amount prior to cash commutation. What else? Any other questions you have about the lump sum, maybe more specifically?
More specifically, I was wondering at what period in time it would be equivalent in terms of the two options. Thank you.
You mean at what point would it be beneficial to take a lump sum, and when is it no longer beneficial? I guess that's the gamble of life expectancy, right? Because if you have a very long life and you live, on average, I think we say between 13 and 15 years after retirement, you would probably fare better not taking the cash out because you'd get the higher lifelong monthly amount for a long duration, which then financially would give you a payout from the pension fund that is significantly higher than cash portion plus a lifelong lower amount as a monthly benefit. But who knows? I mean, it's really, I think what we see from experience, that those who elect a cash portion usually do it based on several factors. One is, do they need cash at the time, to buy a property or to reimburse a big loan and be loan-free, etc. Or they take into account taxation. They say, where I am going to be living, I will have to pay tax on my pension benefit, and that, if I take the biggest possible monthly amount for life, will be a much higher taxation level than if I take my cash lump sum portion and therefore have a reduced monthly income accordingly, and that brings me into a different tax bracket. So these are things the pension fund can't advise. We can just give you those pointers, but we can't say for you it's good, for you it's not good. Maybe just also, of course, if you don't take a lump sum, you have a higher monthly income. Cost of living adjustments are based on the monthly benefit amount you receive. So if you get a higher monthly benefit for life than when you take out your cash, your lump sum, that might over time also kind of significantly have a financial impact. Some people say, whatever, I'm going to take my lump sum, I'm going to invest it, or I buy property that I rent out and the income from rent is so significant that it's more than you could make even if I live 25, 30 years after retirement. So it's really something that you have to study, and that's why it's good to run an estimate earlier rather than later, and maybe consult tax advisors, investment advisors, and so on. Yeah, that's what I would say comes to my mind right now. I don't know, in terms of lump sum, a good idea or not. That's all I can think. Yes, sometimes we have sad cases where a colleague is very sick. I mean, I just talked to someone yesterday, and she knows already that she's probably not going to live for very long and doesn't have children under 21 and doesn't have a spouse. So she says, I'm going to take out as much cash as possible so that I can give that as a gift to my children who are over 21 and then have still my regular income and health insurance coverage and so on. So these are considerations. Of course, this is a very dramatic situation, but that people take into account when they make these decisions. But it is your call. And when we have people come to us and say, would you not, we say, we do not say anything because it's really such a personal decision. Yeah, thanks.
Sir.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And my name is Sunil. My question is about the lump sum itself. Do you have some kind of statistics like what generally people opt for lump sum, like how much, and is there some kind of statistics available basically? Like people go for lump sum and or full pension or...
No, I mean, you're not the first one to ask this. We don't have statistics that I am aware of, and I don't think our Chief of Operations, but I can tell you that from doing many, many consultations over time, I would say we have hundreds and hundreds every month, a lot of people ask about it, and I would say a lot of people who have an option to take a lump sum take a lump sum. Maybe not the full lump sum, but a good portion, and a lot actually do take the 1/3 maximum, generally speaking. But this is not based on statistics. This is based on talking to people, and maybe for Kisa and her team, from seeing, you know, the payment instructions and benefit elections. But it might be interesting for us to look into this, maybe to just get an idea one day. But we don't have statistics at this point. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation. It's very, there's a lot of information, and but it's very, very useful. I just wanted to confirm something. I am looking at my annual statement, and I understand it a lot better now after the presentation, for which, again, thank you. There's still a lot I don't understand. I don't see some of the earlier years' contribution reflected here, no doubt because I'm not reading it right. I also transferred to New York from another duty station, and there's some gaps in years also, no doubt, because I'm not reading it right. I just want a confirmation that this is something that's best resolved by a walk-in into your service and going through the statement and looking at the figures. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. Especially if you have a feeling that there are years missing, it's very important that we look at that, because usually when staff have a feeling that there's something really significant missing, there's a reason. And then we start investigating with you as a staff member, but also with your former employing organization to see whether maybe, you know, we have duplicate ID numbers or something. So 100% yes, please come and see us so that we can sit down, and maybe we can't resolve it at the moment of sitting down with you, but we can initiate reaching out to different sections that are involved in this kind of analysis. But that's why it's great to look at the statement, because it's good to do this now before you separate rather than at the time of separation when it would significantly delay payment of your benefit, because you would have to clean up first possibly your records. Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions. If there are none, Scola?
One more, I've just remembered, just a quick one. What's the benefit, is there an added benefit of staying up to 65?
There is. Yes, there is. So apart from being part of the organization for longer, but yes, there is. Because remember when we talked, I don't know whether you were here at that point, when we talked about acquiring or building your rate of benefit accumulation over time, the longer you contribute to the pension fund, the higher your rate of accumulation. And it is that rate of accumulation that we then apply to your final average remuneration. So let's say you separate at age 62 with, let's just say, 20 years of contributory service, that will give you a certain rate of accumulation. However, if you separate only at age 65, 3 years more of contributory service, and let's assume that you were already at a rate where you acquired 2% of accumulation rate per year, you'd get 6% more accumulation rate than applied to your final average remuneration. So let's say instead of 20% of your final average remuneration, you get 26% as a pension benefit. So yes, there's a very clear benefit in staying longer and contributing longer. But you can leave at 62 if that is your normal retirement age and not be penalized by a reduction factor for early retirement, because you would have reached already what is your normal retirement age for pension purposes. Yes.
I think I would just add to that. I mean, I agree with everything that Christine had said, but what people do not realize is that if they have already reached normal retirement age of 62 and decide to stay until 65, basically you're giving up your 3 years worth of pension, right? Because we're not going to go back. We will pay your pension at the time that you separate from service. So if you think about it, effectively, you are working, you're working with your salary less your pension. That's how some people would look at it, right? Because we're not going back to your 62 age. When you stay until 65, we will pay your benefit effective your 65th birthday. So basically you forfeit the 3 years of worth of pension. So it's just something that people do not really think of, but yes, you get the rate of accumulation at 2% for every year, so 3 more years, 6%, but still, you're effectively working less, your salary less your pension benefit.
Okay, was there another question over here? If not, let me thank everyone for all their really good questions. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time and your interest. It's really our pleasure to provide this. We really encourage you to come visit us because we want your retirement to be right, and we want you to make the best decisions. And our staff is very, very willing to help you. For those of you in New York, it's very easy to come by. We have regular hours, and so I want you to feel free to do that. And we also have a call center, and I know that people are very responsive to that. So thank you again for coming. Thank you for my experts here for providing all that good information. And hopefully we will do another series of these kinds of sessions, because I think this is helpful for people to just become aware of what's needed to be thought through in terms of planning for retirement. Thank you very much. Have a great day.